For today's Essential Heretics 101 feature, we interview Iain Roberts, Airbnb's global head of employee experience, discussing his transition from design to HR leadership and applying design thinking to organizational structure and employee experience.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of HR Heretics. Today we have Iain Roberts on the show. And Iain, you have a very interesting background. You're a designer by trade. You worked at IDEO for like 15, 20 years, something like that. You ended up working at Ford for a little while. Mostly you were operating on the product and design side. And then in 2023, you joined Airbnb to lead people and culture. Can you help us understand, like, how does one go from a design background into leading people and culture at Airbnb?
It's been a journey, but I think if I go all the way back, right? I remember parent-teacher conversation, and my art teacher said to my mum and dad, everything needs to be designed. And that idea of everything needs to be designed kind of like stuck with me for the last 30 years of my career, right? The first half of my time as a designer, I spent a lot of time designing the stuff, right? Designing the product or the service or the digital experience that they were trying to ship out into the world. And then the second half of my career in the design profession was asking the question, why is it so difficult for organizations to get those new ideas through themselves and out into the world? And so for that second decade, I spent much more time designing how organizations work and actually figuring out how they can get new ideas through their structures to deliver new growth and new innovation out into the world.
I love that everything needs to be designed. Like, what does that mean in your head?
It means that things don't happen by accident, right? It means that we're constantly shaping the environment and the systems around us. At the end of the day, it is a conscious act of shaping people, systems, and technology to try and get the outcome that you want. Airbnb is just 7,000 people, right? All we have is 7,000 people. And so the design effort here is designing the system of the right people, working on the right things in the right way, in the right organizational structures. That's the entire ball game. It's a massive and a huge design challenge, and one that I'm incredibly privileged to have the opportunity to work on.
So let's talk a little bit about Brian's comments regarding founder mode. So my read was essentially the traditional advice when you hire an executive is you hire that person and then you just get out of their way and you let them operate. Brian's view on that traditional advice is that it's broken, and it's broken because they can be off doing stuff that you're not aware of and you're misaligned with. And so Brian's also talked a little bit about being in the details. Do I have that right?
It's a much debated topic, right? And I think it has been a much misinterpreted topic, right? I think one of the things Brian talks about is this idea that leadership should be defined in its presence, not in its absence. And for me, what I found in working with Brian is he leads like a designer, right? And what does that mean? It means he is highly collaborative in the way that he wants to work through problems, right? Because innately in design is this idea of interdisciplinary collaboration, teams always being better at getting to the outcome that you want than any one individual. And that can be challenging to some people, right? Who are used to being given the autonomy and the mandate to go off and do the thing and bring back the answer. Whereas actually how I found Brian really wants to work is he genuinely wants to roll up his sleeves and sit down next to you and work through problems together. And that's what it means to be in the details. And so the idea, Nolan, of like frequent iteration touch points that you're talking about, that's a design practice as well. It's called prototyping and iterating. And so my experience of working with Brian is exactly that. How do I get to be at the same side of the table as him with my sleeves rolled up, collaborating on problems together?
Yeah, you're talking about micromanaging, right? And so this one's been in the oven for a little while for me since it came out. And the weaponization is micromanagement, right? It's like the CEO is up your ass and around the corner on every single thing. What I'm hearing from you is actually like, no, no, no. This is just a modern way of management, right? So instead of, I think the antiquated way of management was we hire Iain, I get out of his way. I never bother him. I never like see what he's doing, and I just like trust it's happening. And then 6 months later, I'm like, holy shit, Ian, what have you been doing?
It doesn't feel like that. Doesn't feel like that to me here, right? And I think that's the beauty in when it's done well, how it feels to truly be able to get to better outcomes together because you're actually working on the problem together, as opposed to talking about or presenting findings or recommendations. There's a real difference between working on the problem together and then presenting your findings to the CEO. Maybe I'll add as well, though, that even the idea of having a single product roadmap with 7,000 people aligned towards one set of goals, delivered on a deadline we say we're going to deliver it, which is how we operate, which is not how practically any other software company operates. That for me is just another great example of how Brian's using the management systems he's got at his fingertips to kind of drive the intensity we need, right, to be really successful. We don't just launch when ready and iterate out in the wild like many other software companies. We are conscious of the notion that every summer, every fall, we have a big release. Those releases should add up to something so that they are noticeable and meaningful to the market.
Yeah, but that's a new practice, right, Ian? What caused that change?
Before the pandemic, Airbnb had grown incredibly quickly and was organized in a more traditional GM structure. And I think Brian's been quite vocal about the idea that he felt like he was losing control of where was Airbnb going and what was it becoming. And so the leadership that he exhibited to get, and of course with the founders as well and the rest of the executive team, to navigate this organization through the pandemic, when everybody said, is this the end of Airbnb? To a radically successful IPO, to then this idea of we got to organize differently to get our house in order, to ensure that our foundational product works exceptionally well, right? That was a new thing in 2021. It's a new invention in the organization that's only 3-4 years old now, right? I think you can see, if you look at actually what we launch every half, you can see that the scale of the ambition is getting bigger and bolder every 6 months. We've launched 535 product upgrades in this new model over the last 4 or 5 years. So, it's working for us to be able to actually take effectively the same size organization and deliver much more with it over time.
Ian, you said something a few minutes ago or earlier, prototyping and iterating, right? Doing that with a product, a thing, a service is one thing. Prototyping and iterating with human experiences, right? People's jobs, their pay, that can be a little bit more difficult, right? And high stakes. So have you run into any of those, challenges?
You can't prototype with people's careers, right? So there is a line, but you can prototype in a way that goes a lot further beyond a product. So let me give a couple examples, right, of work we've done in the last year. So one of our signature parts of our employee value proposition at Airbnb is live and work anywhere. And it's a policy that we launched 2.5, 3 years ago. And we, in the last 12 to 24 months, have been consistently improving it, right? Almost treating it a little bit like a software launch. So if that was live and work anywhere 1.0, what's 1.1? What will be 1.2? What will be 1.3? How do we continuously improve it over time? We've been deploying what I would call a gathering strategy approach. So we're actually saying, rather than just say to people, come into the office once a quarter, general guidance, or 3 days a week, or whatever your version of that is, we sit down with every function and we literally design a gathering strategy with that function that says, when do we believe you should come together for what purposes to do what work at what frequency throughout the year? I am a firm believer that not all work should be done in the same way. And so a lot of the mandates that we see happening right now feel a little bit blunt force because they don't recognize that the work of a finance organization is quite different to the work of a product development organization, is different to the work of an HR organization. And so a lot of what we've been working on is defining what's the kind of work that function does, And therefore, what's our guidance and our guidelines around how we think that work should be done? And then how does that translate into a gathering strategy? So for our product development teams, they come together much more frequently to do the kind of like gnarly problem solving of like what's the next thing we're going to launch, or the technical reviews of a software of a code base. Whereas actually, if you think about our finance or our G&A functions, they're coming together less frequently for more community gathering, recommit to the mission and the purpose of actually that function. But we've been prototyping with that all of last year. And then the last thing that I think we've just begun instituting 6 months ago is for our most senior leaders, the people that are closest to the product launches, that really are the people that will help us be successful or not in our product launches. We recognize that most of those people were spending about 3-4 days a month in the office, primarily in our headquarters in San Francisco. So we just invited them to spend the same 3 to 4 days a month in the office. And we did in-person weeks. And in-person weeks was literally an invite. It's not a mandate. It's an invite from me to say, we think you should gather on this week. We'll do some light programming that will bring you together and make it better for you to be in the office together. But that's actually the time when you might want to schedule that kind of like deep problem solving work that's better done in person with your cross-functional partners. And so like again, how we're working for me is a continuous act of prototyping, because anybody that's choosing to be on this hybrid or flexible path like we are doesn't have the answer. The answer is going to emerge over time through continual iteration and improvement of the model.
I love that answer. And that's why I asked it, right? Because there's always things you can iterate, experiment, and prototype on. Same question we get with AI, right? Nolan, some of these questions, like, I can't really do much with AI. It's this, there's always something you can experiment with. Hey, everyone. We'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Your workforce is your organization's greatest strength and often its largest single expense. But without the right tools, understanding where your workforce spend is going or how it impacts your bottom line can be a challenge. That's where Planful comes in. With Planful, HR and finance teams get the clarity they need to make smarter workforce decisions, gain real-time visibility into workforce fluctuations, forecast with confidence, and adjust talent acquisition plans collaboratively based on costs today and into the future. No more guesswork, just data-driven insights to help you plan with accuracy. And the best part, Planful is fast and easy to implement, so you can be up and running in weeks, not months, with minimal IT support. Plus, as your company grows, Planful grows with you, providing endless runway for strategic workforce planning at any scale. Ready to take your workforce planning to the next level? Join over 1,500 organizations already using Planful. Visit planful.com/heretics to learn more. AI changes how work gets done. Recruiting is no exception. Metaview is the AI platform purpose-built for recruiting. If you're looking to level up your AI adoption and see real impact from intake to offer, it's a no-brainer. Metaview's suite of AI agents works for you at every stage of the hiring process. Their platform powers instant job post creation, AI-powered candidate Q&A, insights on pipeline performance, compensation, and so much more. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in candidate debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes all of that. For every candidate in every pipeline, bring radical efficiency and precision to your hiring process with perfect data from every conversation. Metaview covers all of your compliance needs, works with all of your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at more than 3,000 elite companies like Brex, Deel, 11 Labs, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Just head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts or get started for free. You'll be up running and AI-enabled in minutes.
Yeah, Ian, I think it's pretty contrarian today, though. Like the live and work policy, when you guys launched it, was essentially, call it like in the middle of when everybody was going remote because of COVID. And now the inverse has happened. And, specifically, if you talk to investors, I think every investor now is genetically coded to say, well, if you're not in the office, we're not going to write the check. I'm hearing that all the time for early stage tech companies. And yet it seems like you and really Coinbase are the only two companies that are like, nope, this is the future of work. This is how we're going to continue to do this. I'm curious of like, is there a pull from the other side, from Brian or from others? Like, we don't have enough in-person time and that's hurting our ability to get things done.
I think there's more of us than just Coinbase and Airbnb. There's a small alliance of us that are kind of like sharing learnings, because it's a harder choice to make, right? To say you're going to commit to this hybrid or flexible approach, I think it requires orchestration. Frankly, it requires me and my team to absorb the complexity of that design problem. Because right now, because if we don't absorb it, then we leave it to the employee, and then the employee decides to turn up on a Monday, and none of their relevant coworkers are there, and it's a rubbish experience. So why would they bother coming into the office, right? So I think what I'll say is Brian deeply believes, I deeply believe we need to do the right thing for Airbnb. Whatever makes Airbnb stronger is the right thing to do. We have seen tremendous gains through deploying and improving a live and work anywhere approach. We've continued to see, we do annual engagement surveys. We've continued to see incredibly high levels of engagement, right? 86% of employees would recommend Airbnb as a great place to work, largely because of a lot of the flexibility that we afford them through the Live and Work Anywhere program and all the policies and support systems that go underneath that. Attrition is at kind of historically low levels. And I acknowledge that we're in a slightly funky labor market right now, but attrition, a lot of actually the reason why our attrition is trending lower than you might expect, we attribute to the fact, and we hear from our employee base, it's because we're giving them the flexibility to choose the best way to do their work that really meets their needs as well as the organization's needs. And what we're finding with the things that we're doing in more intentional gathering and these in-person weeks, we began to ask questions in our engagement survey around actually how effective are we at problem solving and collaborating? And we're getting really good feedback and sentiment from the organization that the intentionality that we're building into the gathering is actually helping us spend the right amount of time, right? The right amount of time doing the in-person work. So it's not like 5 days a week. 5 days a week is just, well, it's just a number, right? The reality is it's about the right amount of time doing the right work. And when you can play with that complexity and when you can absorb that complexity on behalf of your employees, I think there's huge outsized benefits. So we have no intention to go back. I only intend for us to continue to kind of like move forward and continue to learn and evolve how we're doing this to make a fitter and healthier organization.
Yep, it's very contrarian in today's world. And two things I'll leave you with is number one, nothing drove me crazier than the open office work plan to where you could just get no work done when you're in the office. And then number two, the best talent has extreme agency. And so they can choose. And those people are consistently choosing companies that enable some sort of flexible work policy to where they don't have to be in the office every day. And it's not just to hang out with their kids or do laundry, which I think is what Twitter says. It's to get shit done at home because it's a more effective environment to get work done that you can do by yourself without collaboration.
Yeah, 2 points you made. I just want to really like highlight. One, we see it too, like our ability to tap into the best talent, right? Most diverse talent into the different talent pools across the US and globally. Our ability to do that through this is just unparalleled, right? Compared to where we were before, when such a majority of the employee base had to live within commuting distance of San Francisco. I mean, it was a crazy choice to be making if you think about how we used to live in that world as well. So we're certainly seeing that the best talent has the agency that you're describing, and this is allowing us to attract and retain that best talent over time. The second is just so true, which is when you need to do deep work, when you need to write that memo, or you need to really consider that report that you're pulling together, I would much prefer to do that at my kitchen table here, right, where I'm talking to you today, than in an open plan office. But when I need to influence the senior leaders in the decisions they're making, it's much easier to do that in one of our cafes when I literally interact with someone for 7.5 minutes and I accelerated a piece of work by 3 weeks. And so again, it's consistently modulated by what's the type of work and what environment does it need? Does it need asynchronous collaboration or synchronous collaboration? Is it better done in person or is it better done digitally?
Yep. Well, Iain, thank you so much for the time. I think Airbnb is one of the most interesting case studies in how a company manages their people and their employees today. And we'd love to have you on in a few more months to check in and see how things are going.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you both.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.